I like puppets.
What is a famously evil dictator doing in a classic children's story? You'll have to ask Guillermo Del Toro about that. And while you're at it, you may want to ask him how he came up with all these Easter eggs he included in his Pinocchio.
My name is Pinocchio. I'm your son.
Number 1. There's one big part of Pinocchio that is totally Nightmare Alley inspired. Guillermo del Toro fans likely didn't miss all the connections between Pinocchio and the director's other films. The Carnival in Pinocchio, in particular, is heavily inspired by Nightmare Alley. That film and Pinocchio were actually being filmed at the same time. And Cate Blanchett, star of Nightmare Alley, took an interest in being part of Del Toro's next film. That's precisely how she scored the role of Spazzatura. Number 2. What does Mussolini have in common with Tom and Jerry? One particular scene in Pinocchio. When we're first introduced to Mussolini in the film, he arrives in one very long red car. If this looked familiar to you, chances are you're a fan of a certain famous cat and mouse duo. In Tom and Jerry, Boots the cat appears in a very similar car. Number 3. Pan's Labyrinth fans also got a visit from a familiar face in Pinocchio. But if you blink, you'll surely miss it. If you look closely, you can spot the fawn from Pan's Labyrinth in the window. Number 4. So, what about The Shape of Water, you ask? Of course Del Toro had to include an Easter egg to one of his other award-winning fan-favorite films. In Geppetto's workshop, you can see the window from The Shape of Water. Number 5. Count Volpe is a new character that you probably don't recognize from other versions of Pinocchio. Still, just because he's new to this adaptation doesn't mean he's not informed by characters from the past. In many ways, Count Volpe is a version of both Honest John and the puppet master Mangiafoco from other adaptations. Based on how manipulative and, frankly, sinister he is, it's pretty clear what Count Volpe has in common with these fellow Pinocchio antagonists. And not to mention, his scepter is a fox to nod to Honest John.
Just as I thought.
Number 6. The wood sprite has some interesting inspiration. Instead of the traditional blue fairy, this movie has the wood sprite. Of course, like the blue fairy, the wood sprite is also a blue fairy, but her inspiration goes a bit deeper than that too. She's also influenced by a character from another one of Guillermo del Toro's famous works. Can you tell just by looking at her? Yep, it's the Angel of Death in Hellboy.
Who on earth are you?
On Earth, a guardian.
Number 7. Did you wonder why Spazzatura is named Spazzatura? There is a reason, and it's actually pretty dark. Spazzatura means garbage in Italian. So this monkey being named that has a little, or maybe a lot, to do with how he's treated by everyone except Pinocchio. Number 8. Mussolini is certainly an unexpected character in Pinocchio, but besides his major role, he shows up in a few other places. Count Volpe rolls out his advertisement over an image of Mussolini painted on the wall. Later, a Mussolini poster appears over Pinocchio's performance poster. Number 9. When you first started watching Pinocchio, you probably weren't expected to see a bombing. Well, as we've learned, this Pinocchio is a bit darker than his predecessors. This can be compared pretty closely to a scene in The Devil's Backbone. In fact, according to art director Robert Dessous, way back toward the beginning of the storyboarding process, Guillermo asked that we match the bomb-dropping scene from The Devil's Backbone. The framing, camera placement, and action within it are strikingly similar. So this scene didn't just nod to The Devil's Backbone, it was directly modeled after it. And that wasn't the only clear similarity that these two films had. Number 10. Notice anything familiar about the dormitory in Pinocchio? The dorms are clearly modeled after the boys' dorms in The Devil's Backbone. And bonus points if you also caught the similarity between the two movies' Christ statues. So why all the similarities between these movies? They're actually designed to be companion pieces. In fact, Pinocchio is actually the third in the trilogy. The other two are Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth. The movies in the trilogy have connecting themes of war and being a child. Number 11. There are foreshadowing puppets in Geppetto's shop. There are puppets that look like a monkey, a fox, and a knight, which clearly foreshadow what's going to happen later in the story. Number 12. Who is Arthur Schopenhauer and what does he have to do with Pinocchio? He's this guy. Sebastian J. Cricket hangs his portrait up on the wall inside the pine tree. Arthur Schopenhauer is a German philosopher who was coined the artist philosopher. In general, he was a bit of a pessimist and believed that there's no such thing as free will. And it seems like Sebastian J. Cricket is a huge fan of his. There sure was a lot of thought that went into this movie. So what are your thoughts about these Easter eggs? Did you catch any that we didn't mention? Let us know in the comments. And if you love videos like this one, make sure to like and subscribe to The Things Animated.